I have always believed that true innovation emerges from moments of staggering challenge, and I learned that lesson early in my journey. There was a time when I found myself at a frustrating crossroads, standing in the aftermath of a string of rocket test failures that threatened not only the survival of a fledgling space company, but also my own conviction that pushing humanity forward was possible. The early days were filled with exuberance and an almost reckless faith that it would take flight without too many obstacles. Yet every rocket that failed to reach orbit reminded me how naive that hope could be. Each explosion was not just a technical malfunction, but a personal blow that left me awake at night, questioning every assumption I had made. Investors grew skeptical. Critics loomed with predictions of imminent collapse. I felt the weight of disappointment crushing me. Even with all my passion for exploring the unknown, there came a moment when I paused to ask myself, am I chasing something unattainable? That haunting question hovered over me like a constant echo, daring me to stop. In that stretch of darkness, when every spreadsheet and trajectory analysis pointed to a vanishing runway, I found myself grappling with the stark possibility of total defeat. My fear of letting everyone down sometimes outweighed my hope for success. And yet, even in the wake of destructive tests and unnerving financials, I sensed a small kernel of determination refusing to let go. Then came the day when our fourth rocket launch achieved orbit. It was the breakthrough I've been praying for. Suddenly, intangible promise of space exploration became real. Our battered hopes took flight alongside the rocket, crossing into the quiet brilliance of Earth's orbit. In that moment, I felt a surge of renewed faith that when you persist despite the odds, transformation can occur in the blink of an eye. The overwhelming sorrow of previous failures replaced with awe and relief, serving as a lifelong reminder that resilience is often forged at the edge of disaster. While I speak of rockets and orbits, I know each of us faces obstacles that can seem just as daunting, whether in business, as technology, or personal endeavors. You might be wrestling with dwindling resources or a vision that others tell you is unrealistic. You might be finding it impossible to secure support, or perhaps you're struggling to connect to those who can help you build momentum. Still, every individual in this room carries an extraordinary spark. That unique spark can be the difference between giving up and forging a new path that nobody believed today was possible. I propose that we elevate our perspective on resourcefulness. I want to encourage each of you to tap into the wellspring of creativity that already exists within your networks and your immediate environment. Let us move away from the notion that must wait for perfect conditions or endless funding before we can start building. Let us instead learn to reimagine setbacks as building blocks, to identify hidden assets in our surroundings, find novel ways to combine what we have into what we need. So, not only can we overcome personal and organizational hurdles, but we can also collectively spark innovations that reconfigure the world around us. I would like to share with you how the principle of being resourceful, of using what you have to create what you need, has not only propelled spaceflight ambitions, but can also ignite the hopes and dreams in your own pursuits. Let us travel this path together. I invite you to remain open, to embrace bold thinking, and to discover the power of leveraging every resource within reach. This new path calls for a mindset shift, a fresh lens on failure, and an unwavering belief in the transformational energy of perseverance. Together, we can create breakthroughs that extend well beyond our current imaginations. Now, I want to delve into why resourcefulness is the ultimate catalyst for genuine impact. It applies to building businesses, tackling social challenges, and unlocking technologies that advance the species. Let us journey through a set of guiding principles to illuminate exactly how we can harness resourcefulness in our daily lives. Let us do it with the conviction that our limitations can be reinterpreted as stepping stones for success. By the end of this, I hope you will feel empowered to look at your own challenges with fresh eyes and a renewed sense of possibility. I believe this is our call to action. Let us begin. When we talk about forging meaningful outcomes, especially when circumstances feel restrictive, the trials we face are usually the catalysts that reveal the depth of our resourcefulness. It is during these trials we discover what truly motivates us, we are willing to risk, and how deeply we can dig to find solutions that might elude us in calmer times. I invite you to explore these concepts with me, trusting that resourcefulness is not a last resort option, but a powerful, creative force waiting to be unleashed. Now it's time to embrace it, refine it, and let it elevate everything we do. The first step is to examine why resourcefulness matters on a fundamental level. Then, every challenge that arises, personal, societal, or technological, we will see how to adapt and pivot using whatever resources we possess. This is how we break down the walls that might otherwise confine us. This is how new value is created from what once seemed like scraps. Let us discover how. I've identified 5 key aspects of resourcefulness, each reflecting a different angle of the same principle. Let us walk through them one by one. The first aspect draws on a discovery pattern to open our eyes to what might be hiding in plain sight. The second will illustrate how stories can shine a spotlight on the ways resourcefulness saves us in moments of crisis. The third focuses on analysis, reminding us that data and research can clarify the path forward. The fourth is interactive, challenging us to apply and practice resourcefulness in real time. Lastly, problem-solving perspective will tie everything together with actionable steps. In exploring each aspect, we will address the trials that often test us, the transformations that occur when we push through them, and the wisdom we gain that we can bring back and share with the world. And with each step, I will share a quote that resonates with the core lesson of that aspect, hopefully shining further light on our journey. Let us begin with the first key point, dedicated to discovering the hidden potential in our surroundings. We will see how an open mind can convert barriers into gateways. I encourage you to listen with an adventurous heart, ready to see possibilities that were previously unnoticed. Now, let us dive deep. Discover hidden potential. Sometimes the greatest challenge lies not in the absence of resources, but in our failure to notice them. This point will be guided by a series of questions, a compelling case study, a careful exploration of what it all means, practical solutions you can use, and a final breakthrough realization. I will start by asking you something important. Have you ever had a moment when you felt utterly stuck, only to realize later that the solution was within reach all along? Think of a time when you searched everywhere for an answer, but only in hindsight did you see that you already possessed the necessary elements. That might have happened in your personal life, your career, or within a project that demanded creativity. It can be humbling, can it? Sometimes we focus so intensely on what we lack that we become blind to what we have. Illustrate this, consider an example from a developing region where a team of innovators took discarded cell phone parts to build low-cost medical devices. As external funding wavered, these creators refused to be held back by their location or financial limitations. They scavenged old electronics from recycling plants and junkyards. Then, piece by piece, they reconfigured sensors, screens, and microcontrollers to measure vital signs such as heart rate and blood pressure. Although crude in appearance, these prototypes be tools that saved lives in remote areas without access to state-of-the-art hospital equipment. The story is remarkable not simply because they invented new medical tech from scraps, but because they revealed a fundamental truth: advanced solutions can emerge from seemingly primitive resources when guided by determined minds. This case study underscores the fact that resource often flourishes in conditions that might appear dire. When typical channels, funding supply chains, manufacturing options are limited or even non-existent, are forced to look inward. We are compelled to ask whether we can repurpose materials at our disposal or adopt new perspectives on old tools. This deep analysis reveals an important dynamic: constraints drive creative thinking. And scarcity can accelerate invention. It happens in small communities. It happens in fast-paced startups trying to disrupt industries. It can happen within each of us the moment we stop limiting what we lack and start leveraging whatever we do have. The practical solutions from this story revolve around reimagining your environment. Begin with an inventory. Identify every skill set in your team, every tool in your workspace, every network connection, and every asset that at first glance might appear irrelevant. Then ask, can these items be recombined in fresh ways to solve the problem at hand? Is there a technology from one field that might be applied in another? Any partnerships you have overlooked because they fall outside the conventional approach. By systematically reshuffling the pieces, you often come across configurations that were previously unimaginable. This approach applies just in technology or healthcare, but in every domain. If you're running a small startup, you might find that the marketing intern's hobby in web design could save you a fortune when building your online presence. If you're leading a community initiative, perhaps the local library can become your training center, eliminating the need to rent expensive venues. The philosophy is consistent: see your resources with fresh eyes. Once you start recognizing that what you have might be exactly what you need, you reach a breakthrough conclusion. Resourcefulness is not an occasional tactic, but a mindset. It is not a frantic scramble in times of desperation. It is a consistent approach perceiving the world around you. Whenever you face a hurdle, remind yourself that you have a hidden treasure in your own backyard waiting to be discovered. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, man often becomes what he believes himself to be. If I keep on saying to myself that I cannot do a certain thing, it is possible that I may end by really becoming incapable of doing it. These words may remind us about scarcity or abundance can dictate our reality. Consciously shifting your perspective on hidden potential, you open doors, ingenuity, and impact. In the bigger scheme of our hero's journey, this discovery parallels the moment when the protagonist first glimpses the bigger world. You might still be facing tests and uncertainties, but you sense a glimmer of possibility. You stand on the threshold, recognizing that your perception of reality determines whether you see stumbling blocks or stepping stones. By learning to spot and harness overlooked resources, you arm yourself at the beginning of a powerful arsenal to take on the trials ahead. Stories of hidden potential abound. Think of the software engineer who, lacking a powerful computer, wrote code by hand. planning every line so meticulously that once the code finally ran on a borrowed machine, it worked flawlessly. Reflect on the small restaurant that used leftover produce and day-old bread to pioneer a special menu that not only reduced waste but turned a profit. In each instance, a narrow constraint opened the door to unexpected benefits. The same can happen for each of us. Where we see limitations, we might uncover ingredients for greatness. That's the essence of the first key point. And now, let us flow into the second. We approach resourcefulness through the lens of storytelling. If our first key point invited us to discover untapped possibilities, this next perspective will illustrate how real narratives can illuminate what resourcefulness looks like in times of pressing need. Let us move deeper into our hero's trials. No matter how many times I reflect on the notion of invention under constraint, I am consistently reminded that stories can spark a profound emotional resonance, making lessons more tangible than any theoretical lecture. The second key point unfolds through a story, a deepening of the challenges and the solutions that emerged, leaving us with lessons that resonate long after the story has ended. Let me share with you a story hook that has stuck with me for years. A small robotics startup that I once visited was working out of a cramped garage space. The team consisted of a few college dropouts and 2 experienced engineers who had left stable jobs to pursue a dream of designing robotic arms that could automate various repetitive tasks. Their workspace was constantly humming with the sound of motors and code being tested. They didn't have the glossy labs or the deep financial backing that more established competitors enjoyed. They did have an almost fanatical commitment to problem solving. They scrounged leftover components from older robotics projects, crowd source code from online forums, and tested prototypes on battered plywood benches that they had salvaged from a nearby demolition site. The situation escalated when they entered a robotics competition that offered a substantial cash prize. The challenge required building a robotic system capable of sorting items of different shapes and weights at high speed and precision. Competing against larger companies with sophisticated labs, garage teams stood out as the underdogs. Lacking advanced sensors, they had to improvise. They purchased discounted cameras, the type usually installed for basic home security, then hacked them to serve as visual recognition systems. For the conveyor mechanism, they repurposed an ultra-old treadmill motor purchased from a thrift store. Every challenge that arose seemed to have a solution hidden in some corner of their environment. If they needed a mechanical part, they turned to local metal shops for scraps. If they needed specialized software libraries, reached out to open source communities for guidance and patches. The greatest challenge they faced was calibration. The cameras would sometimes misread item shapes and send incorrect signals to the robotic arm, leading to chaotic sorting errors. This problem nearly crushed their spirits because it was more complex than just swapping out a broken sensor. They needed advanced algorithms, which typically required high-end computing resources. Yet in that tense environment, they devised a workaround. They installed a modest GPU on an outdated computer, then paired it with cloud-based machine learning frameworks that offered free usage tiers for small-scale experiments. Finding local hardware with remote processing, they trained their model just enough to make it work reliably in real time. They refined this approach repeatedly, encountering one roadblock after another, but never running out of creative ways to tackle each one. In the end, their solution worked. When the day of the competition arrived, the big players arrived with polished designs and flashy demonstrations. In contrast, the garage team presented a machine that still carried visible signs of its humble origins. It looked rough, but it functioned superbly. It sorted items with efficiency and precision, delighting the judges who never imagined such ingenuity could come from a ragtag operation. They won second place, an astonishing achievement for such a small outfit. More importantly, secured interest from potential partners and were awarded a smaller but still game-changing investment that allowed them to refine their technology further. The lessons they shared afterward were equally striking. First, learn that constraints can actually accelerate the learning curve because each problem forces new layers of invention. Second, collaboration extended far beyond their immediate circle, since open source communities and local workshops contributed crucial pieces to their solution. Third, they realized that appearances, while important to some extent, can overshadow genuine functionality. The raw aesthetic of their robotics system didn't matter. What mattered was its performance. Finally, they found that every time they solved a small challenge, their confidence soared, making them eager to tackle the next. For anyone watching from outside, their story highlighted the central truth of resourcefulness. You do what you can with what you have, and that can be surprisingly effective. During a reflection session, one of their engineers said something that has stayed with me. When you're cornered, you realize how much you really need to survive and how much you can let go. These words capture the essence of what being resourceful means in an entrepreneurial context. It's about cutting through the noise, focusing on the absolute essentials, and allowing your creativity to flourish because you simply have no other choice. At the close of that experience, the audience in that little garage felt united by a sense of shared possibility. One of the engineers connected the dots with a concise phrase. Realized that our constraints were actually the scaffolding for our creativity. It is precisely that mindset shift that transforms adversity into an engine for innovation. It reminds me of a quote from philosopher Jean-Jacques, "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet." In this context, we can interpret patience as to willingness, wrestle with obstacles, to wait for solutions to emerge from experimentation. The sweet fruit arrives when at last your improvised efforts coalesce into something functional and new. From a hero's journey perspective, Garage Robotics' team faced the gauntlet of trials. Through their resourcefulness, they started to evolve, stepping into a transformation that would carry them to new horizons. This is where the tension of the journey intensifies. It's no longer a simple matter of discovering hidden tools. Now we see that once these tools are identified, a flurry of further challenges rushes in, demand an even higher level of creative adaptation. Confronting those challenges, we edge closer to our transformation. If you are in the audience, perhaps you can identify with these trials. You might be an entrepreneur working on a limited budget, a student trying to innovate with scant resources, or someone in a community organization lacking the infrastructure to fulfill a big vision. Whenever you feel discouraged, remember the lesson from that scrappy robotics startup. It is not the shine of your workspace that matters. It is the fire in your determination. There's always a way to make the most of whatever elements you can gather. With that, we arrive at the next key point. It's about exploring resourcefulness from an analytical angle. We will look at statistics, market trends, and research to build a case for why resourcefulness is not merely a romantic idea, a practical necessity in today's rapidly evolving world. Let us move forward in deeper trials and breakthroughs. As an entrepreneur who has kept an eye on how markets and technologies shift, I firmly believe that resourcefulness is not a peripheral virtue, it is an economic and strategic imperative. Statistical data reveals that over 90% of startups fail, and one common reason cited is the lack of proper capital resources. However, a closer examination often shows that many of these companies possessed enough resources to start. They simply did not leverage them effectively. They struggled to adapt when unplanned challenges arose. So while insufficient funding may appear to be the culprit, the underlying issue is frequently a lack of resourcefulness. Market trends also underscore this point. Globalization connecting us on an unprecedented scale. Competition intensifies. Startups and established companies alike need to innovate rapidly to stay relevant. This relentless pace often rewards those who can iterate quickly with minimal waste, whether that means adopting a lean methodology, crowdsourcing design ideas, or pivoting a product concept based on time user feedback. The ability to adapt is often tied directly to resourcefulness. Instead of fixating on obtaining more capital or more manpower, some of the most nimble organizations focus on the absolute most of making what they currently have. Depth research on organizational behavior points to the concept of bricolage, a term borrowed from anthropology and used in entrepreneurship to describe the process of making do, with resources at hand to create novel solutions. Studies have shown that entrepreneurs who engage in bricolage not only have a higher likelihood of sustaining their ventures, but often outperform competitors when faced with external shocks like economic downturns or supply chain disruptions. This is because they have developed a culture of adaptability. They know how to reconfigure existing systems to respond to new problems, rather than seeing constraints as insurmountable barriers. They treat them as puzzles to solve with the materials available. Practical applications of this mindset abound. Consider the rise of businesses that adopt agile methodologies. They hold daily stand-ups, set short sprint cycles, continuously refine their product based on immediate feedback. At the core of Agile is the idea of continuous improvement, using existing data and resources rather than waiting for the perfect plan or endless funding. This approach is mirrored in the popularity of minimal products, MVPs, which allow companies to test concepts without massive upfront investment. By launching an MVP, entrepreneurs gather real-world insights and use those insights to make calculated refinements. If the product fails to meet user expectations, the team pivots quickly, repurposing lessons and existing code to build the next iteration. This approach drastically reduces waste compared to the old model of building large-scale products in isolation before learning whether customers actually want them. To the future, we can make some bold predictions. As technology advances, resourceful individuals and organizations will be best positioned to leverage emerging tools like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and advanced robotics. Rather than being intimidated by the complexity or cost of these technologies, resourceful thinkers will seek ways to integrate open source AI libraries, form strategic alliances for shared development, or adapt existing blockchain frameworks to niche applications. This is precisely how new products and services sprout from smaller teams that manage to disrupt entire industries. Over time, ability to be resourceful will become a primary differentiator in a global economy that rewards efficiency creativity, and speed. Those who cling to old models of heavy spending and linear growth may find themselves outpaced by leaner, more versatile competitors. To cement the importance of this analytical viewpoint, I recall a quote by business strategist Peter Drucker: "The best way to predict the future is to create it." In this context, creating the future involves leveraging what is at our fingertips today. By analyzing data, trends, and research, we gain a clear picture of why being resourceful is not just a personal philosophy, but an urgent requirement for staying ahead. We see that resourcefulness is woven into the DNA of successful organizations that learn to pivot gracefully rather than collapse under pressure. This is the crucible in our hero's journey where knowledge and adaptability intermingle. The hero begins to see that resourcefulness, not just about patching solutions together, it is an essential strategy for long-term success. It is through this lens that we come to the fourth key point, which adopts an interactive pattern. Here, we pivot from merely understanding or appreciating resourcefulness to actually engaging in exercises, discussions, and direct practice that solidify our transformation. In the spirit of the trials that define our hero's path, this is the moment where we invite active participation so that the revelations we have seen so far truly take root. Before diving into our interactive exploration, consider a thought exercise. Close your eyes, if only for a moment, and imagine a pressing challenge in your life. It could be related to your work, your personal goals, shared community project. Picture the resources you believe you lack. That might be capital, time, expertise, or connections. Now, imagine you have to solve this challenge in just a few days. How would you repurpose? Would you have to make progress? Would you gather a group of friends or colleagues? A brainstorming session? Would you look at existing tools in a fresh light? Maybe adapt technology you already own. By picturing the scenario vividly, you begin to unlock new potential solutions that might never have occurred to you otherwise. If we were together in a workshop setting, I would ask you to form small groups for an in-person discussion. In these discussions, each participant would share one current obstacle that seems insurmountable due to limited resources. Others in the group would ask questions, offer alternative perspectives, and challenge assumptions about what is truly scarce and what is merely undiscovered. It is often in these intimate dialogues that we find that the real resource shortage lies not in our material assets, but in our willingness to experiment or collaborate. Often, simply hearing another person's problem-solving process can light up an insight in your own mind. Next, we would transition to a session of experience sharing, where each group highlights real-life situations in which they or others overcame a similar challenge by reconfiguring existing resources. This step reinforces the notion that resourcefulness is a pattern we see repeated across varied fields. Whether it is a teacher who used recycled materials to turn a basic classroom into a dynamic learning environment, employee who automated a tedious task by creatively combining existing software tools, these experiences drive home the universality of the principle. It comes to direct practice. If we had the luxury of time and space, I would ask each participant to take one of the identified challenges and spend an hour actually prototyping a solution with the materials on hand. These materials could be anything from basic stationery and smartphone apps to online resources. The objective is not to arrive at a polished final result. To put yourself in the mindset of making something tangible out of what is immediately accessible. The eureka moments that occur during such direct practice can be transformative because you realize in a very visceral way that your success is constrained less by your environment and more by the mental frameworks you bring to it. At the end of this interactive process, the group would gather again for learning summary. We would reflect on what it felt like to operate within constraints, how we discovered new uses for the everyday items around us, and how the synergy of collaboration accelerated our progress. We would note how breaking down a large challenge into smaller steps made it feasible to prototype swiftly. This sense of collective accomplishment can be incredibly motivating. People walk away with the conviction that resourcefulness is accessible to anyone willing to experiment and learn. In the spirit of continuing this immersive approach even here, I encourage you to replicate a simplified version of this exercise on your own or with a colleague. Set aside an hour, identify a real-life challenge, and see how far you can go by leveraging your immediate resources. You may be surprised at the path you carve out once you commit to doing rather than just thinking. If I had to capture this interactive key point in a quote, I choose one from Leonardo da Vinci: "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." In moments of constrained creativity, the simplest and most elegant solutions often lie in the reimagining of tools and material I've taken for granted. We have now covered 4 angles on resourcefulness: discovery, storytelling, analysis, and interaction. Each angle is pushing us further along the hero's journey, where we confront trials not just as obstacles, but as catalysts for transformation. The 5th key point will employ a problem-solving pattern to tie everything together, ensuring we have a structured methodology for actually implementing what we have discussed so far. This is the moment in the hero's journey where we internalize the lessons and to preparing them back to our world. Let us think of a common challenge that many of you might be facing launching a new product or service on a tight budget. First, we identify the challenge. Suppose you have an innovative concept, but lack the funds to hire a large development team or run expensive marketing campaigns. A typical reaction might be, wait until you can secure enough resources. However, a resourceful approach asks, what can you do right now? To move forward, next comes root cause analysis. Why do you believe you need more money or personnel? It's because of a preconceived notion that only large-scale campaigns work because you are following an outdated playbook that prescribes heavy initial investments. Is there a fear that a scaled, back, or imperfect launch will fail to capture interest? By scrutinizing these root causes, we often see that many limitations stem from established conventions rather than immutable laws. Perhaps more agile, iterative launch could achieve enough traction to secure the additional resources later, waiting indefinitely for a windfall. Then we move to solution proposals. You could partner with a small web development firm that is willing to trade partial payment for equity. You could build a community on social media platforms before your product is fully developed, soliciting feedback to shape your offerings. You might use open source frameworks to reduce software costs or crowdsourcing to handle design tasks. Each of these proposals use existing structures or relationships in a way that stretches your minimal budget. You test multiple small-scale marketing tactics using free or low-cost channels to see which resonates most strongly with your target audience before committing to a bigger spend. In effect, you're building a living laboratory of micro-experiments fueled by your resourceful mindset. The next step is creating an action plan. The plan might map out the first 3 increments of 2-week sprints. Each sprint focuses on a slice of product functionality or a specific marketing channel. You measure progress through well-defined success metrics, maybe a certain number of sign-ups, social media engagement, viability of a functional prototype. By continuously iterating on your plan, you conserve resources and direct them where they yield the most value. This step-by-step guidance keeps you grounded in measurable milestones rather than vague aspirations. Finally, we define success metrics. If your immediate goal is to validate product market fit, success might be achieving your first 1,000 user sign-ups with minimal acquisition cost. Or if your aim is proof of concept, success might be building a working prototype that garners positive feedback from a select group of beta users. By choosing metrics carefully, you have a clear sense of whether you are on the right track. These metrics are not static, they evolve as your strategy refines itself. Each success or failure feeds back into your resourcefulness loop, teaching you how to adapt further. In essence, this problem-solving approach transforms an overwhelming challenge into a sequence of structured steps. Identifying the problem, diagnosing its root cause, proposing multiple solutions, building a plan, and measuring success. Each of these steps encourages you to find and use resources you already possess, whether they be social capital, existing technology, or your ability to negotiate creative deals. This is how you solidify resourcefulness into a repeatable process, making it part of your entrepreneurial DNA. To emphasize this final perspective, consider a line from Thomas Edison. Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. This quote captures an elemental truth. Opportunities for resourceful solutions are often overlooked because they require effort that does not match our idealized visions of seamless success. But once we put on those overalls, roll up our sleeves, and follow a problem-solving process, we discover that resourcefulness is more than a clever trick. It is an ongoing commitment to doing the best we can with what we have. And in so doing, transcend the boundaries we once assumed were fixed. By now we have traveled through 5 key points, each offering a lens on resourcefulness. We have discovered hidden potential, shared storytelling lessons that bring theory to life, analyzed data and trends to prove the viability of a resourceful mindset, engaged in interactive methods to practice it, and finally, embraced a structured approach to problem solving that cements resourcefulness into ongoing strategy. In terms of our hero's journey, we have overcome formidable trials, undergone a significant transformation in perspective, and are now ready to return with wisdom that we can apply to our businesses, our communities, and our personal goals. What remains is the final act, the wisdom return, where we tie our insights together and look to the future. This concluding section serves as our platform to carry what we have learned back to our everyday lives, to share it, and to challenge ourselves anew. Let us move toward that concluding reflection with clarity and resolve. I foresee a future where resourcefulness will be the defining trait of successful innovators, leaders, and communities. Technology continues to evolve at breakneck speed, so the ability to pivot and make use of available tools will matter more than ever. We will see a surge in collaborative platforms, open solutions, and decentralized networks, all of which lower the barriers to entry for people who once felt locked out of the innovation ecosystem. In this world, the size of your budget will not be as critical as your capacity to creatively combine existing assets into new breakthroughs. It is an exciting vision, but also one that demands action. If you look at 5 or 10 years, imagine the challenges and opportunities that will arise. Will there be pressing environmental crises that demand rapid responses from grassroots communities? Undoubtedly. Will new sectors of the economy emerge, requiring entrepreneurs to adapt at lightning speed? Almost certainly. In every such scenario, those who can respond swiftly with available resources will become the vanguards of progress. They will set an example of agility, using constraints as fuel for unprecedented leaps in technology and social solutions. I want to leave you with a challenge. Perhaps you have listened to this discussion and felt a spark of inspiration. Maybe you have been reminded of a project you shelved because you believed you lacked the resources to make it happen. Now is the time to dust off the dream, confront it again, and ask yourself if there is a resourceful pathway forward. Perhaps you can form a collaboration with a local institution. Perhaps you can run a crowdfunding campaign to validate market interest. Maybe you can offer your skill set to another project in exchange for the expertise you need. The specifics will vary, but the principle remains do not let the absence of ideal conditions halt you. If you have started to see the possibilities, I commit to supporting that vision by continuing to champion resourceful innovation in every venture I undertake. Through my involvement in companies that push boundaries in space exploration, electric vehicles, energy solutions, and digital connectivity, I will keep opening doors for those who dare to dream but worry they lack the means. In truth, the best ideas often come from places and people we least expect, precisely because they've learned to operate with grit and determination in challenging environments. My promise is to create more platforms and opportunities where such ingenuity can flourish. We have the power to build a collaborative ecosystem that fosters resourcefulness. By sharing success stories, creating open channels for knowledge exchange, and by investing in grassroots projects that solve local problems in creative ways, we can magnify our impact. When we appreciate resourcefulness as a universal principle, it becomes easier to see how each of us can contribute. Sometimes that contribution is financial support. Sometimes it's mentorship. And sometimes it is simply giving someone the chance to prove what they can do with limited means. Each contribution strengthens the cycle of positive feedback that propels us forward. As we close, I hope you feel energized, seeing that the concept of being resourceful, using what you have to create what you need, is not a backup plan or a consolation prize. Rather, it is the beating heart of genuine innovation. Adopting this mindset can transform how you approach every step of your journey, from conceptualizing a bold idea to bringing it to market, from small projects to massive global endeavors. Is the resilience that keeps you afloat when the storms roll in, and the spark that ignites a revolution in your mind when others see only darkness. We are all in this together, standing on the cusp of challenges and breakthroughs that will shape our collective future. When you find yourself doubting your capacity to move forward, remember these stories and insights. Think of the innovators who built life, saving devices out of discarded cell phone parts. Picture the Garage robotics startup that conquered a national competition with thrifted materials and unbreakable determination. Recall the analytical evidence that shows resourceful organizations are more stable and adapt in volatile markets. Reflect on your own capacity to engage in exercises that shift your mindset toward action. And finally, revisit the structured problem-solving approach that breaks massive goals into feasible, actionable steps. I encourage you to hold on to this momentum. Be that person who sees opportunity in every pile of spare parts. Be the leader who draws on the diverse skills of a small team to achieve results that far exceed what anyone believed possible. The world needs your unique brand of resourcefulness, and I believe our best days lie ahead if we embrace that call. Let us lift our eyes to the horizon and acknowledge that we have a crucial role in determining what the future looks like. It will not be shaped solely by those with most capital or the biggest facilities or the loudest voices. It will be shaped by those who make the most of whatever they have, who find a way no matter how improbable it seems, who do so with a sense of purpose that transcends personal gain. May your journey be guided by the conviction that the resources within reach are more than enough to light the path toward tomorrow's discoveries. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of resourcefulness. May we each go forth committed to unlocking the full spectrum of possibilities that await us, confident that we have within us the creativity and perseverance to transform our limitations into powerful forces for progress. Let us continue to push boundaries, refusing to be deterred by naysayers or seemingly insurmountable odds, and in doing so, let's write the next chapter of human advancement, one resourceful innovation at a time. Let this be our inspiration, our shared promise, and our guiding principle as we forge ahead, reshaping the impossible into the inevitable through the magic of using what we have to create what we need.